The sharpest blade isn't the one that strikes first. It's the one that's been waiting quietly, already sharpened for the moment it's needed. My dear chosen ones, lean in. This moment isn't just another day in the endless back and forth of noise and posturing. This is the reckoning they swore would never come. And yet here we are. The masks are cracking. The whispers are echoing back at them. The very stage they built to showcase their control has become the arena of their embarrassment. They thought they were conducting an orchestra, but they've been dancing to your rhythm the entire time. Let's get this straight. The hardest truth for them isn't that they were wrong. It's the humiliation of realizing you've known their entire script from the beginning. They've been playing chess thinking you were a pawn while you've been quietly holding the rule book. This isn't paranoia. This is precision. You've been reading their moves like yesterday's news because, chosen ones, you weren't guessing. You were knowing. Think about the years they wasted. All those private side conversations, all that gossip, the schemes, the little plots designed to twist your story. The average person will spend 5 years of their life trying to decode others, to manipulate, to gossip, to pull strings. And yet, imagine the sting of discovering that the person you tried to outwit had already done the math, had already seen the pattern, and had already moved on. That isn't just a blow to the ego. That's a collapse of their entire illusion. And that, my chosen ones, is exactly what you're witnessing now. The curtain is falling on their little theater. All the big reveals they've been saving like trump cards have turned out to be reruns of a show you watched seasons ago. They thought they'd shock you. They thought they'd expose you. But you'd already closed that file, adjusted your life, and moved forward. You're not being surprised. You're being validated. That's why they're squirming. That's why they're scrambling. Let me ask you a question. Have you noticed how loud they've gotten lately? Loudness is a cover for panic. People who think they're in control move with quiet confidence. People who know they're losing get noisy. Every tweet, every whisper, every forced smile is a sign of desperation. They're acting like magicians whose tricks don't work anymore, throwing glitter in the air, hoping you won't see the empty hat. But you see it. You've always seen it. That's the difference. You weren't blind, my chosen ones. You were patient. You weren't clueless. You were calculating. You didn't miss anything. They simply underestimated how much you already knew. And here's the twist they never saw coming. Their entire power play was built on your predicted reaction. They needed your panic. They needed your scrambling. They needed your collapse to validate their control. But you didn't give it. You didn't flinch. And when you refused to play their game started to fall apart. Picture this. They're standing on a stage, rehearsed lines ready, dramatic music queued up, waiting for you to gasp. But instead of gasping, you yawn. Instead of panicking, you smile. Instead of clapping, you leave the room. Nothing cuts deeper than realizing the person you tried to outsmart had already outsmarted you without even trying. It's the equivalent of showing up to a race only to discover the finish line moved hours ago and you're running alone. That's where they are now. And before we dive deeper, chosen ones, let me pause for just a second. If this message is already striking something inside you, if you feel that fire of recognition, support this movement. Smash that like button so the world knows you're awake, and hit subscribe so we can keep putting in the effort to bring you content that lifts you, sharpens you, and fuels you with unstoppable energy. Every click, every share, every comment helps us keep building this platform of strength, clarity, and truth. This is why your power as a chosen one is so dangerous to them. It's not about titles. It's not about shouting louder. It's about foresight. It's about discipline. It's about knowing that real strength is built in silence and revealed only in results. They mistook your restraint for weakness because they couldn't imagine living without external validation. They mocked your patience, thinking it was ignorance, while you were quietly mastering the blueprint they couldn't even read. And now, here we are. Their big gotcha moments have been exposed as nothing but recycled scripts with different actors. They're in the clown costume, not you. They wanted to trap you in their drama, but your refusal to perform left them standing in a spotlight that only highlights their own chaos. The irony burns. In trying to study you, they handed you the data to understand them. In trying to control you, they revealed their own lack of control. So yes, my chosen ones, let this moment be motivation. Let their noise remind you of your quiet strength. Let their desperation be proof of your preparation. You are not here by accident. You are here because you built habits in silence. You kept your integrity when nobody was watching. You practiced restraint in a world addicted to spectacle. And now the payoff is arriving, not as applause, but as clarity. If you've been doubting yourself, hear this. Their embarrassment isn't random. It's the direct consequence of your discipline. Their panic isn't proof you're in danger. It's proof they are. Their scrambling isn't your cue to react. It's your confirmation that you've already won a battle they're still fighting. This is not the time to shrink. This is the time to stand in your quiet knowing and keep walking forward. Don't break your rhythm to clap back at noise. Don't hand over your composure for a moment of spectacle. You've already moved beyond their arena. The game they're playing is old news. The plot twist they're banking on is already in your archive. Stay locked in, chosen ones. Stay deliberate. Stay clear. Because now, as they stare at the wreckage of their miscalculations, they're finally realizing the truth. You've known this entire time, and nothing is more humiliating to someone playing games than discovering the game was lost before it began. Chosen ones, before we step deeper into this moment, take a breath and feel what's happening. This isn't just another video playing in the background. This is your confirmation, the echo of everything you've quietly known. If what you're hearing resonates, if you can feel the truth of it in your own story, show it. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop the number 77 in the comments so we know you're one of the few who already see through the noise. Your support keeps this channel alive, pushing out content that isn't just talk, but a mirror of your own power. Only the chosen recognize these signs because ordinary eyes can't see them. And now, let's step into it, piece by piece, because what you're about to hear will feel like watching your own story play out in real time. Number 1. They laughed at the blueprint you were quietly perfecting. They laughed at the map you were silently drawing while they walked in circles. Mockery is the applause of the insecure. It's the noise people make when they can't touch your discipline. My dear chosen ones, remember this moment. The very people who tried to turn your patience into a punchline are now choking on their own laughter. They mistook your silence for surrender, your restraint for weakness, your quiet work for nothing at all. And now, as the dust settles, they're realizing the truth. You weren't lagging behind. You were building a different road entirely. They thought they were clever, pointing at your so-called mistakes, exaggerating your pauses, framing your discipline as odd. They called your timing strange, your boundaries dramatic, your decisions inconvenient. They assumed you were fumbling when in reality you were mapping. Every small refusal, every quiet choice, every unseen habit was a brick in a foundation they couldn't see. Mockery is loud because it has nothing else to offer. Mastery is silent because it's already doing the work. Chosen ones, think about it. When someone ridicules your carefulness, what are they really revealing? Their fear of discipline. People addicted to chaos despise boundaries because boundaries expose their chaos as a choice, not a fate. When you said no to their noise, they called you slow. When you held back from their drama, they labeled you naive. When you protected your energy, they framed it as weakness. But what you were actually doing was teaching yourself to survive without external validation. And nothing terrifies a manipulator more than someone who doesn't need their approval. You practiced small economies of trust while they blew their savings on attention. You gave less of yourself to those who only took and kept your energy for what mattered. That kind of self-control looks strange to people who live by extremes, so they mocked it. They played a short game with visible trophies while you were stacking invisible wins. Habits built in quiet rooms, promises kept when no one was watching, refusals that protected your future. Mockery felt like victory to them because drama gives instant content. But instant content is empty calories. Long-term wins take time, and time doesn't trend. You gave them irony instead of spectacle. And when the tide turned, your patience revealed results they could no longer ignore. They felt foolish, not because you changed overnight, but because you had been consistent all along. The sting they're feeling now is the taste of their own underestimation curdling into embarrassment. Let me ask you, chosen ones, have you ever wondered why their laughter felt so sharp? Because they needed it to drown out the sound of your progress. They mocked what they couldn't understand because understanding would require them to confront their own lack of discipline. They saw your restraint as an insult to their urgency. They saw your quiet progress as a threat to their performative success. And they couldn't imagine that someone who looked behind was actually miles ahead. That's the power you've been carrying without even realizing it. You weren't just surviving their noise, you were documenting their patterns. You were training yourself to move without announcing, to prepare without seeking applause. And now, while they scramble to rewrite their narrative, you're standing on a foundation they never took the time to build. Their jokes, their gossip, their comparisons, all the tools they used to belittle you, were powerless against the slow architecture of your life. Mocking you was easy. Mastering what they mocked was hard. And that hard work is the secret they missed until it was too late. Their jokes have become footnotes in a story where you're the author, not the punchline. Their surprise is just punctuation on a sentence you wrote long before they even noticed the paragraph. This is why, my chosen ones, you must not shrink when they laugh. Their mockery is actually confirmation. It's proof you're building something they can't see yet. Let their noise remind you of your quiet strength. Let their short game motivate you to stay in your long game. Because when the curtain falls, and it always does, the stage belongs to those who prepared, not those who performed. You might be asking yourself right now, but what if they keep mocking me? What if they never stop? The answer is simple. Mockery has an expiration date. It lives on reaction. When you don't feed it, it starves. When you stay consistent, it fades. And when your results show, it flips into respect or silence. Either way, you win. So take this moment as fuel. Every time they doubted you, you were stacking another invisible win. Every time they laughed at your boundaries, you were reinforcing your foundation. Every time they tried to make you feel slow, you were proving that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That's the paradox they can't handle. The person they mocked for being careful ended up being unstoppable. This is your edge, chosen ones. You're not here to impress them. You're here to outlast them. You're not here to react to their noise. You're here to let your results speak. And as they finally realize you've known their game the entire time, remember, their laughter never defined you. Your discipline did. Their mockery never shaped you. Your mastery did. Stay steady, stay deliberate. Keep drawing your map while they keep walking in circles, because the longer the distance grows, the clearer it becomes who was really leading all along. Number 2. Their web of lies collapsed against your clarity. Their lies were empty because you already held the blueprint. A lie only has weight if the listener carries it. When you refuse to pick it up, it stays as light as air. My dear chosen ones, this is where their entire playbook starts to collapse. They built their strategies on lies, rehearsed them like actors before a big premiere, whispered them with confidence as if repetition could turn fiction into fact. They believed the performance itself was power. But a performance without an audience is nothing but noise echoing in an empty room. That's what they never saw coming. You weren't buying tickets to their show. They thought their words had weight because they repeated them so often. They convinced themselves that if they whispered a story to enough ears, if they wrapped it in just enough fake urgency, it would land. But lies only work on people who believe them. You didn't. Not because you had screenshots or receipts hidden in your pocket, but because you already knew the truth before they ever opened their mouths. They were staging a drama you'd already read the script for. This is what unsettled them most. You never flinched. You didn't argue. You didn't scramble to defend yourself. You didn't exhaust yourself chasing every rumor down like a fire that needed putting out. That calm was their first clue that something was wrong. Not with you, but with them. When someone is lying and the person they're lying to stays calm, it creates a panic they can't shake. Their whole strategy relies on your reaction. They need you angry, desperate, reactive. When you don't give it, the scaffolding of their scheme starts to bend. Chosen ones, understand this. You knew the blueprint of their deception. You could see where the seeds were planted, who they whispered to, and how they tried to control the narrative. Every move was predictable because you'd studied the pattern long before. Lies are rarely creative. They're recycled, lazy, desperate, different actors, same tired script. That's why you stayed grounded while they tangled themselves deeper in their own contradictions. Imagine them as puppeteers behind a curtain, convinced you're mesmerized by their show. But you're not watching their performance, you're studying the strings. You're already aware of the ending. They pour effort into twisting your reality, and the harder they push, the more obvious it becomes. That's why they look so foolish now. It's not that you needed evidence to defend yourself. It's that the lies never had power to begin with. There's a special kind of humiliation in realizing the person you tried to deceive had been quietly aware the entire time. Every secret meeting, every whispered slander, every exaggerated story now feels pointless to them. They weren't tricking you. They were tricking themselves into thinking you didn't know. That's the punchline. Chosen ones, their big "we fooled you" moment was nothing but a self-own. They wanted their lies to be heavy weapons. They turned out to be empty shells. And because you refused to carry them, they fell harmlessly to the floor. Your stillness didn't just protect you, it exposed them. They relied on your reaction to validate their performance. When you gave them nothing, you left them alone on a stage built for two, talking to an audience that had already left the room. Let this be your reminder, chosen ones. You don't need to shout to defeat deception. You don't need to collect every receipt to prove you're right. Clarity is stronger than evidence. Discernment is stronger than exposure. Your calm is not complacency, it's a weapon. It's the discipline that turns their manipulation into a confession. And now they feel it. The panic of people who have built a reality on sand and watched it wash away. Their lies were never clever. They were never original. They were simply recycled attempts to control a narrative you'd already stepped out of. The blueprint you carried wasn't just knowledge of their moves, it was proof of your own power. You'd moved beyond their story before they even finished writing it. So hold steady, my chosen ones. Every time you refuse to react, you tighten the rope on their own contradictions. Every time you stay grounded, you drain the oxygen from their performance. This is why they're scrambling now, because nothing terrifies a manipulator more than realizing their lies don't land. In the end, your calm isn't silence. It's victory. And that victory is exactly why they finally feel foolish. Number 3. They confused your silence with weakness and paid the price. They took your stillness for weakness, while you were mastering the clock. Impatience is the camouflage of insecurity. Silence is the armor of someone already winning. My dear chosen ones, this is the moment where your quiet power becomes their loudest regret. They thought patience was the pause between moves. They never understood that for you, patience was the move. They looked at your stillness and saw a blank page, not realizing it was a chessboard where you'd already set every piece in place. They laughed at your calm because chaos is all they know. In their world, motion equals progress, noise equals proof, and reaction equals relevance. In your world, discipline equals freedom, timing equals leverage, and patience equals control. They mistook your ability to hold back as weakness, but in reality, it was the sharpest form of control you could wield. People who thrive on chaos can't comprehend quiet strength. To them, if you're not reacting, you must not understand what's happening. That's why they mocked, smirked, and whispered while you stayed still. They needed your reaction to validate their scheme, but all they found was composure, and composure to them felt like a wall they couldn't scale. Chosen ones, you saw everything. You registered the jabs, the half-truths, the subtle betrayals. You clocked the inconsistencies and logged them mentally, not out of paranoia, but out of precision. You chose not to meet them on their level because you understood a simple law. Reaction feeds their fire, restraint starves it. That restraint irritated them to no end because it deprived them of proof. They wanted evidence they'd gotten under your skin, a crack in your calm, a flinch they could replay to their allies. Instead, your stillness became a mirror that showed their own desperation. What they failed to realize is that patience isn't passive, it's active power. It's the discipline to let time expose what people think they're hiding. It's knowing that some truths ripen like fruit, too early, and they're bitter. At the right time, they're undeniable. Their biggest mistake was thinking they had time on their side. They believed their lies would hold, their alliances would stay firm, and their schemes would go unnoticed. You already knew the clock runs out on everything built on deception. You didn't need to rush to expose them. You didn't need a dramatic reveal. You just needed to wait. Every exaggerated performance, every manipulative move, every false smile piled up until the weight of their own behavior started to crush them. Your patience was the silent witness that allowed the truth to reveal itself. Now they feel foolish because all the while they thought you were clueless. You were actually documenting, not with a pen and paper, but with memory, with discernment, with observation. Your patience let them believe they were in control, and in doing so, they exposed more of themselves than they ever intended. The beauty of patience is that it doesn't need to announce itself. It's not loud. It doesn't beg for recognition. It's the invisible scaffolding behind every victory that lasts. When the truth finally arrives, patience stands tall as proof that you were never out of the loop. That's the sting they carry now. They wasted energy trying to provoke a reaction while you conserved energy and let the truth arrive on schedule. Think about it. Chosen ones, while they were burning fuel on theatrics, you were storing energy for results. While they were building a stage, you were building a foundation. While they were rehearsing a script, you were watching the clock. Their laughter has now turned to silence, and your silence is revealed for what it always was, not ignorance but mastery. This is your confirmation. Patience is not the absence of power. Patience is power refined. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows the end game before the opening move. And now, as they scramble to rewrite their narrative, you can walk forward knowing this truth. Every second you held back was a second they underestimated you, and every second they underestimated you was another step you gained. They're just now realizing it. You've known it all along. Number 4. Every mask they wore crumbled under your discernment. The masks are slipping, and you've been seeing their true face all along. A mask can fool a crowd for a moment, but consistency is a mirror that always cracks the disguise. My dear chosen ones, lean closer. This part is crucial. They're only just discovering that you've been reading every mask before it even fit their face. They thought their smiling voices, their sudden support, their staged compliments were enough to blind you. But while they were rehearsing their lines, you were studying the rhythm of their performance. You weren't reacting to the costume. You were responding to the person beneath it. Understand this. When someone behaves kindly with an agenda, the kindness has a different heartbeat. Real generosity moves steadily. Manipulation stumbles. That uneven rhythm is like a flickering light in a dark room. You saw it. You adjusted accordingly. You gave space where honesty deserved it. You created distance where boundaries mattered. And you gave trust only where integrity proved itself consistent. That wasn't coldness. That was calibration. They expected you to mirror them, to match their emotions, mirror their theatrics, get swept into the tempo of their performance like everyone else does. But you didn't. You kept your responses tied to character, not theatrics. That's what rattled them. They couldn't lure you into alliances with strings attached. They couldn't manipulate you into feeding their image, because your rule was simple: reward authenticity, withhold energy from pretense. And that, chosen ones, is what slowly stripped the power from their masks. Over time, your consistency made their fakery look ridiculous. Their manipulative generosity and staged loyalty began to resemble showmanship more than relationship. The mask they wore to control your perception only clarified it. The more they performed, the clearer their real motives became. They didn't realize that by doubling down on the act, they were making your job easier. This is the part they never understood. You weren't shocked when their true selves surfaced, because you had been watching how they behaved when it was inconvenient for them to be nice. You'd already seen the envy in small gestures, the sabotage in tiny moves, the backhanded compliments that sounded sweet but cut deep. These things have a shape, a rhythm, a signature. You recognized it long ago. Your refusal to react to the mask and your insistence on responding to the person underneath was your shield. It allowed you to protect your life without creating drama. And now their humiliation is complete because they realize the masks never fooled you in the first place. They invested so much time and effort into shaping your view of them, only to discover you had never bought the illusion. Chosen ones, let that sink in. The power of appearances dissolved the moment you treated them by their true character. They feel foolish now because their entire strategy depended on your willingness to believe the costume. When you didn't, the costume became a joke. The audience started to see the face beneath the mask because you refused to react on cue. People who hide behind kindness to gain advantage are always exposed by consistency. Real kindness looks the same on good days and bad. Real loyalty shows up without strings. Real integrity doesn't shift depending on who's watching. You knew this, you practiced this, you built your life around this truth, while they built theirs around appearances. Now their masks are slipping, and the audience can finally see the face you've been responding to all along. That's the sting they're feeling. Not just exposure, but the realization that their entire performance was wasted on someone who saw through it from the start. So take this moment as a reminder, chosen ones, never mirror theatrics. Always measure character. Because when you do, the people wearing masks expose themselves without you having to lift a finger. And the humiliation they feel now, that's not your doing. That's their disguise collapsing under the weight of your discernment. Number 5, their script failed. Because you'd already seen the ending. They were acting out a play you'd already seen before. The biggest mistake of an actor is thinking the audience doesn't know the script. My dear chosen ones, listen closely. This is the moment where their arrogance has backfired the loudest. Every smile they rehearsed, every timed confession, every staged apology was part of a script they believed would catch you off guard. They built their whole performance on one fragile assumption, that you were watching for the first time. What they never considered is that you'd already read the script cover to cover, underlined the weak lines, and memorized every cue. While they were practicing theatrics, you were tracking patterns. They mistook drama for power. They assumed that sudden generosity with hidden strings would look like kindness. They assumed that public gestures would disguise private motives. They assumed that their big reveal would land like thunder. But chosen ones, you weren't sitting in the front row clapping. You were sitting in the control booth, quietly noting each move, each beat, each recycled trick. When you've seen a play enough times, the surprise vanishes. What once felt shocking turns into confirmation. Their drama didn't bewilder you. It proved you were right. And this is where your power came alive. While they were busy manufacturing reactions, you moved from reaction to design. You adjusted your boundaries. You shifted your alliances. You made deliberate choices that exposed their theater without a single public confrontation. You didn't need to storm the stage. You simply stopped feeding the script, and without your predictable responses, their entire choreography cracked. Actors need an audience to feel real. Without your applause, they were just people in costumes talking to themselves. Ask yourself this: chosen ones, why did their confidence suddenly evaporate? Because the grand reveal they were saving, the moment they believed would destroy you, was aimed at an audience that had already seen the finale. Imagine planning a big magic trick only to discover your target has been watching the rehearsal from backstage the whole time. That's the humiliation they're feeling now. Every elaborate setup, every staged vulnerability, every strategic burst of generosity has become evidence of their own manipulation rather than leverage against you. Instead of owning the narrative, they became characters in a story whose author had already written better lines. And you were that author. You didn't have to outplay them because you had already outseen them. Their rush to control the story backfired into an uneven, transparent performance that made every desperate move more telling than persuasive. The truth they tried to bury under spectacle surfaced precisely because you treated their acts as data, not drama. That's the quiet genius of the chosen ones. You don't fight the noise, you analyze it. Now they're left with hollow victories. The applause they counted on never came. The spectacle they built now looks cheap under the bright light of hindsight. They're walking around clutching trophies that nobody respects, trying to convince themselves they've won something. But the real victory isn't theirs, it's yours. The victory of foresight, of composure, of refusing to be manipulated into predictable reactions. Let this sink in, chosen ones. You didn't need to sabotage them. You didn't need to expose them. You didn't need to match their performance with your own. You simply stayed grounded, and their own theatrics did the work for you. They rehearsed for a climax. You were already living the conclusion. They plotted for control. You had already stepped out of their game. They tried to lure you into a storyline. You chose your own script. Their shame is loud because their strategy was loud. And the louder the act, the clearer the exposure when the audience already knows the ending. That's why they're scrambling now, why they're second-guessing every move they made. They're waking up to the nightmare of realizing they weren't puppeteers pulling strings. They were marionettes dancing on their own. So, my chosen ones, let their noise be your confirmation. You've seen the script. You've marked the weak lines. You're not reacting to scenes. You're designing outcomes. Keep your focus. Keep your composure. Because the longer you stay deliberate, the clearer it becomes to everyone watching who truly held the pen all along. Number 6. Their illusions of power shattered when you refused to bow. Their throne crumbled because you never bowed to it. Authority built on illusions collapses the moment someone refuses to clap for the performance. My dear chosen ones, listen closely. Their so-called power was never real power. It was a costume stitched together from whispers, fake titles, and fragile egos. They strutted around as if they were kings, hoping you would play the loyal subject. But here's the part that stung the most. You never bowed. You never signed the contract that made their illusion possible. And without your belief, their throne was nothing more than a chair balanced on borrowed thunder. They thought their threats, their gossip, their fake networks, and their inflated reputations would make you flinch. They believed you would scramble for approval, that you would bend under pressure, that you would trade your peace just to stay in their good graces. But you didn't. Instead of panic, you gave them patience. Instead of compliance, you gave them composure. And instead of applause, you gave them silence. That silence was louder than any argument because it revealed the truth. Their empire existed only in the minds of people willing to play along. You refused to play. Chosen ones, here's what they didn't understand. Power is a social contract. It only works if people agree to believe in it. The moment you stopped validating their titles, their labels, their posturing, their engine stalled. They wanted you afraid, but fear is a currency you stopped spending. They wanted you to chase their approval, but approval is something you redefined for yourself. They wanted you to react, but your calm turned their intimidation into background noise. And without your participation, their show lost its audience. You see, intimidation only looks impressive from a distance. Up close, it's all smoke, mirrors, and desperate showmanship. Their staged dominance, their loud entrances, their fake influence, all of it depended on echoes. Gossip is nothing without someone repeating it. Authority is nothing without someone validating it. Fear is nothing without someone reacting to it. And you gave them none of that. You stood still while they jumped. You stayed grounded while they shouted. You moved forward while they performed. That's why their maneuvers started to look clumsy. Their tricks were designed for people who still lived inside their rules, people addicted to appearances and noise. But you changed the rules. You judged by results, not by reputation. You respected actions, not theatrics. You measured people by integrity, not by volume. And the moment you set boundaries and walked away, their crown slipped off. Their so-called networks, built on nothing but image, began to fall apart. Allies who once clung to them for appearances scattered when the image cracked. To them, it felt sudden, like a collapse that came out of nowhere. But you knew better. You had been watching the cracks form for a long time. Their downfall wasn't a dramatic takedown. It was the natural consequence of living on borrowed influence. A house built on borrowed thunder always falls when the sky clears. Chosen ones, let this be your reminder. You don't always need confrontation. You don't need revenge. You don't even need to expose them publicly. Sometimes the most powerful response is non-participation. You refused to be the audience for their theater, and without applause, the performance became pathetic. The silence of the chosen is louder than the noise of the crowd. And here's the beauty of it. While they scrambled to keep their fake image alive, you kept building in silence. You built real relationships, rooted in respect, not fear. You built influence through consistency, not manipulation. You built a foundation on reality, not theatrics. And while their throne crumbled, your foundation solidified. They are humiliated now because they finally understand the truth. Their entire strategy depended on you believing in their show. But belief is power, and you withdrew yours. And when belief is gone, the illusion shatters. That's why they're scrambling now, looking for new ways to matter. That's why their desperation is showing in louder noise and weaker threats. And that's why, chosen ones, you are standing unshaken. Never forget this. Power that cannot exist without applause is not power. It's performance, and performance only lasts until the chosen ones stop watching. Number 7. They called you naive while you were mapping every move. They branded you naive while you were quietly playing mastermind. Calling someone naive is the cheapest way to hide your own vulnerability. It's a mask people wear when they fear being seen. My dear chosen ones, this is the one that cuts deepest for them. They told themselves you were the gullible one, the soft target, the easy mark. They repeated it to each other like a prayer. Too trusting, too slow, too innocent, because it made them feel sharp, superior, and safe. But what they never understood is that your so-called naivete was not a flaw. It was a tactic, a shield, a stage you set so they could reveal themselves without realizing they were performing. While they were busy believing their own story about you, you were documenting theirs. Every casual slip, every offhand comment, every sudden generosity was quietly entered into a mental ledger. Not to hold a grudge, not to plot revenge, but to build a map. You were translating small moves into a clear picture of motive, pattern, and weakness. They thought they were private. You were taking notes. They thought you were oblivious. You were calculating. They thought they had fooled you. You were studying their fingerprints as they left them on everything they touched. Chosen ones, understand the power of what you were doing. People addicted to drama prefer conflict over clarity because conflict gives them something to fight. Clarity forces them to face themselves. They called you naive because your stillness and observation made them uncomfortable. They weren't used to someone who didn't jump, react, or scramble. They mistook your quiet for emptiness when in reality it was a full archive of truth. Your documentation wasn't about collecting ammunition. It was about collecting insight. You weren't building a weapon to fire back. You were building a life that made their behavior irrelevant. That's why they're so unsettled now. They banked their strategy on a misread opponent, a character they wrote in their head who would be easy to trick. Instead, you turned every misstep they made into data. You adjusted relationships. You shifted priorities. You protected your time. All of it without theatrics, without making a scene, without needing applause. And now the sting is setting in. They realized the person they mocked for being too trusting was the person who watched without being watched, who moved without being tracked, who learned without being taught. They see now that your invisibility was your weapon. You weren't out of the fight. You were ahead of it. Let me ask you, chosen ones, how many times have you been called naive just because you refused to match someone's chaos? How many times have you been told you're too forgiving just because you refuse to rush into petty battles? That's their tell. People project labels onto you because labels rally a crowd, but records dismantle illusions. Labels are loud. Documentation is quiet. Labels fade. Records last. You didn't rush to expose them because exposure is messy and temporary. You weren't looking for a viral moment. You were looking for a permanent advantage, and you built one. By the time the moment came to set boundaries, walk away, or present evidence, your quiet accumulation of facts did the work. Loud labels couldn't. What they called weakness turned out to be knowledge applied with restraint. And knowledge applied with restraint is the sharpest blade there is. This is why their embarrassment feels so heavy now. They banked their moves on a caricature of you that never existed. They mistook your patience for ignorance. They mistook your tolerance for gullibility. They mistook your silence for emptiness. And in doing so, they gave you time. Time to watch, time to understand, time to plan. So let their old insults fuel you, chosen ones. Let every time they called you naive remind you that invisibility is power when used with intention. You're not here to prove them wrong in the moment. You're here to outgrow their whole playbook. And as they finally realize you've known this entire time, their label dissolves into your legacy. They called you naive. You turned it into mastery. Number 8. Their grand reveal meant nothing because you'd moved on. Their big reveal fell flat because you'd already read the ending. Nothing is more humiliating than throwing a punch at someone who's already stepped aside. My dear chosen ones, this is where their story starts to crumble in their own hands. They've been clutching a so-called secret like it's a loaded weapon, whispering in corridors, rehearsing speeches, building anticipation for the day they'd finally expose you. In their minds, this was the ace card, the final scene, the knockout blow. But when they played it, the room went quiet, not from shock, but from indifference. Because you, the one they tried to corner, had already seen the script, adjusted your moves, and walked off the stage before the curtain even rose. They thought they were saving a plot twist, but you'd already finished the book months ago. You'd read the pattern, connected the dots, and acted on it long before they gathered the courage to announce their truth. Their revelation landed like a rerun of a show you stopped watching seasons ago. What they paraded as a trophy was nothing but recycled noise to you. That's not just disappointment for them, that's humiliation. Because nothing cuts deeper than discovering your ultimate card isn't even worth playing. Chosen ones, notice the difference between their theatrics and your preparation. While they were scripting a dramatic unveiling, you were building a quiet life that no unveiling could shake. You'd already shifted your energy, cut ties, and made choices rooted in reality rather than rumor. Their so-called bombshell didn't hit you. It fizzled in midair because the work you did in private made it irrelevant. This is why they're scrambling now. They weren't just trying to surprise you. They were depending on your reaction to validate them. Indifference is a mirror they can't bear to look into. They wanted gasps, chaos, applause. They got calm, silence, and a sense of how little their power really weighed. And indifference stings far worse than fury, because fury would at least mean you cared. Instead, your stillness told the world that their big moment was a small footnote. Ask yourself, chosen ones, why did they need a spotlight if their information was so strong? Why did they build suspense like a magician rather than live the truth they claimed to hold? The answer is simple. Theatrics are cheaper than character. People who rely on spectacle know their substance won't hold up without an audience. They thought information alone was power. You knew better, that timing, context, and response are what give information its impact. And here's the quiet, corrosive part of their humiliation. They've realized their mastery was performative. The applause they expected never arrived. Their proof didn't topple you, it toppled their own credibility. By the time they displayed their findings, you had already lived through the consequences, learned the lesson, and moved forward. Their big reveal wasn't a blow to you. It was a self-exposure of their dependence on drama. That's why you stayed unmoved, my chosen ones. You measure truth by consequence, not by spectacle. You understand that the loudest announcements are often the emptiest. You've trained yourself to act on knowledge quietly, so that when the noise comes, it finds you prepared, not panicked. Watching them scramble for significance while you proceed calmly is the real payoff. They wanted to rattle you. Instead, they rattled themselves. They tried to flip the table, but only flipped the mirror. And now they're staring into their own reflection, realizing they've been performing for an audience that isn't even watching anymore. That is a humility they didn't plan for and can't easily recover from. So let their noise confirm your discipline. Let their failed theatrics remind you of your power. Because the truth they tried to weaponize was a truth you'd already outgrown. And nothing is more devastating to a would-be opponent than realizing the person they're trying to strike has already walked out of reach. Number 9. Their traps failed because your calm was calculated. They finally understand why your calm wasn't weakness, it was a weapon. The loudest trap in the world is useless against someone who's already built a life that can't be cornered. My dear chosen ones, this is the part that rattles them the most. They finally understand why you never panicked. They built entire blueprints around your predicted breakdown, waiting for the moment when you would crack under pressure, flinch at a rumor, or scramble for approval. And yet you stood still, not frozen, but prepared. That stillness wasn't ignorance. It was foresight. It was the quiet confidence of someone who has already done the math and decided not to be moved. They mistook your steady composure for smugness, your silence for surrender, your restraint for fragility. But chosen ones, calm is not complacency. It's a strategy. It's the armor you craft in private so that when the storm hits, you're already inside shelter. They thought their whispered threats and carefully timed betrayals would fracture you, but you had already mapped the terrain. You weren't reacting in the moment. You were executing a plan you'd built months, sometimes years ahead of time. Picture it, they're setting snares in the dark, expecting you to trip. But you're moving like someone who's memorized the path in daylight. Each trap springs empty, each setup collapses under its own weight. And while they're frantically trying to recalibrate, you're walking through it like rain off a coat, soaked all around you, but never penetrating. That's the kind of discipline that doesn't come from paranoia. It comes from experience, from refusing to let anyone surprise you into poor choices. Chosen ones understand this. Panic is a reaction reserved for people who don't already know the score. You knew the score. You catalogued the patterns. You recognized the signs. You made decisions in advance, so the shocks they planned had no purchase. And when nothing rattled you, they panicked instead. Their desperation became visible because their entire playbook was built on the assumption that you would fold first. They wanted a spectacle. They wanted you defensive, loud and messy, so they could point and say, "See? We broke them." Instead, you responded with deliberate moves. You reallocated your energy, protected the relationships that mattered, and quietly cut out toxicity wherever it tried to grow. You chose joy on purpose, not as denial of the problem, but as proof of your competence. And nothing terrifies a manipulator more than someone who chooses their own emotional climate. It's easy to scare someone with no plan. It's almost impossible to scare someone who has already built a counterplan and is living inside it. That's what you've done. While they were counting on chaos, you were creating order. While they were rehearsing the moment of your collapse, you were rehearsing self-control. Their entire act fell apart because it relied on a predictable reaction that never arrived. Now their humiliation is sharp. They aim to expose weakness and instead expose their own miscalculation. They mistook your lack of visible distress for an absence of awareness. They thought silence meant ignorance, not discipline. They believed calm meant easy to move, not impossible to manipulate. And when their traps failed, they had no backup plan because their whole confidence existed only in the story of your collapse. This is your power, chosen ones. You didn't need to prove anything in the moment because you'd already adjusted your future based on what you knew. That distance gave you the ability to respond, not react. Every action you took was measured, matched to long-term goals rather than short-term theatrics. And that discipline conserved your energy for real problems and real progress, things they couldn't even imagine while they were burning energy on games. Their regret is loud now because their plan depended on you being rattled. Their failure is quiet because your life just kept moving forward. That's the unshakable truth. People who live calibrated lives don't break when others try to force a fracture. They stand, they breathe, they keep walking. Proof that the plot was anticipated and already defeated before the first trap was ever set. This is the chapter they never saw coming. The moment they realize your calm wasn't a lack of fight, but the ultimate counter move. They've been scrambling for a reaction that will never come, and in that silence, they've revealed exactly who they are, and exactly why you were right to prepare. And so, my chosen ones, we've walked through the truth they never wanted to face. The traps, the lies, the mockery, none of it worked because you had already seen the whole play before it started. That's why they're scrambling now, not you. Their noise has collapsed into silence, while your quiet strength has risen into proof. Remember this: being chosen doesn't mean life is free of opposition. It means you carry the foresight to turn opposition into fuel. They thought they were writing your downfall, but all along they were only adding chapters to your victory. Now here's where you come in. If this message struck you, if you felt every word because you've lived it, show it. Smash that like button so the world knows the chosen ones don't fold. Hit subscribe so you never miss the clarity and power we bring straight to you. Drop the number 77 in the comments to claim your place among those who see through the noise. And share this with someone who needs to be reminded that their calm, their patience, and their foresight are weapons the world can't take away. This is just the beginning. Stay ready, chosen ones, because the louder their embarrassment gets, the clearer your victory becomes.